The stage lights hit my face, hot, harsh, unrelenting. I gripped my Stanford diploma so tight my fingers shook, sweat dripping down my neck and soaking into my collar, a burning reminder of those endless nights coding in a damp little room in Oakland. The traditional Stanford music played behind me, but all I could hear was my heart pounding, loud and heavy like drums at a block party back in my old Latin neighborhood. Hunter Lopez, 23, born in San Jose, raised on a tiny street filled with taco trucks, salsa beats, and dreams nobody dared to say out loud. Standing here in the sea of flying graduation caps and deafening cheers, I felt smaller than I ever had before. My mom sat there in a fancy red dress, my dad fussing with his striped tie, their eyes locked on Marco, my little brother, the only pride they ever openly claimed. Marco sat a few rows away, holding a bouquet that looked more like a trophy than flowers. He smiled, confident, as if this stage had always been his birthright. I glanced down at my beat-up sneakers, the soles worn thin, and remembered all those rainy nights sprinting to my late shift at the cafe. Someone in the crowd shouted Marco's name. My dad raised his phone to capture every moment. I watched my mom lean away, deliberately avoiding me, like I was just a blur in the family photo. I took a deep breath. In my head, I heard my mom's favorite line echoing, "You're strong. You can take care of yourself. Your brother needs the spotlight." Those words weren't just casual comments. They were scars. I remembered that Christmas when I was 15, when I begged her to let me take a winter piano class. She scoffed. "The money's for Marco's public speaking lessons. You can figure it out on your own." I stayed silent, retreating into my corner, listening to piano notes drifting from the neighbor's window, each key a cruel reminder that some dreams were never meant for me. That night, I stayed up, teaching myself to type code from old YouTube videos, my fingers numb and stiff in the cold. Marco got everything, the classes, the tuition, the brand new car. What did I get? Empty lines like, "You're tougher, you're more mature." But today, standing here, I knew one thing. I was never invisible. I was never weak. I was just silently preparing. Even if these old sneakers were falling apart, I stepped onto that stage with my head held high. I heard the whispers from the family row. My mom turned her face away, clutching her purse so tight her knuckles went white. My dad stared at Marco, tense, like he was afraid I'd ruined their perfect performance. All my life they wanted me behind the camera, capturing Marco's victory. But today, everything changed. I grabbed the mic and looked up, feeling that burning light on my face. My heart thudded so loud it felt like it might burst out of my chest. Tonight, I don't need anyone's pictures. I don't need anyone's congratulations. My voice rang out, dry but sharp as a blade. I paused, locked eyes with them in the front row, watched Marco drop his gaze, his face turning pale. The whole auditorium went dead silent. Someone dropped their program. I pressed my lips together, eyes fixed on my parents. I wasn't going to say, "You were wrong, Mom." Not yet. That line was for later, when everything was undeniable. Right now, I just wanted them to witness every single word, every breath I took. I closed my eyes, remembering those freezing nights, those tiny cafe tips. I got here with blood, sweat, and nights I collapsed face first onto my keyboard. Did they see what I had built from absolutely nothing? Have you ever been shoved behind someone else by your own family? If you have, you know exactly how it feels. Because tonight, this is only the beginning. Tonight, with those blinding stage lights still burning above me, every memory came crashing back like waves pounding a frozen shore. I remembered those winters in San Jose, when the wind sneaked through every crack in our little house. We weren't so poor that we skipped dinner, but we were poor enough that Christmas gifts were just old socks, borrowed library books, and the same tired line, "Your brother needs it more." Every time Marco tore open a box, remote control cars, a new bike, summer camp vouchers, I just watched, forcing a crooked smile. I learned to swallow that bitterness down so deep it never reached my eyes. I remember when I was 13 and brought home an essay that had won a statewide contest. My dad glanced at it, set his newspaper down, and said, "Good job. Now help Marco prep for his science fair presentation next week." Those words seemed light as air, but they slammed into me, shattering any fragile pride I had managed to piece together. That's how I grew up, cooking my own dinners, biking alone to tutoring sessions, patching up my own jackets when the cold came. Marco, he always had Mom by his side, checking his homework, Dad driving him to every debate club and every extracurricular event like he was a prodigy on tour. In family photos, Marco always stood center stage, beaming. I was somewhere on the edge, smiling faintly, like morning fog that disappears before anyone notices. At school, I wasn't invisible. I was top of my math class, got invited to the robotics club. But at home, all my accomplishments were just little extras to inspire Marco to try harder. I remember that night Marco got a full scholarship to a Stanford summer camp. They popped champagne. Mom clung to him, sobbing with pride. Dad clapped him on the back, saying, "You're the family's hope." I stood in the kitchen washing dishes, listening to the fizz and crackle of champagne bubbles, my heart frozen like a winter pond. That night, I booted up my old laptop, hunting for free scholarships, online courses, anything I could learn without needing a single cent from them. I started teaching myself coding, data analysis, devouring every free library book I could get my hands on. Once, my guidance counselor pulled me aside and asked, "Why don't you apply for financial aid? With your record, so many schools would help." I just smiled and shook my head. I knew if I couldn't stand on my own, no one would help me stand for long. But honestly, there were nights after all the lights were out when I cried into my pillow. Did anyone hear me? No, just the wail of an ambulance speeding down the block, dogs barking in some distant backyard. I'd whisper to myself, "Toughen up, Hunter, no one's coming to save you." Years passed. I patched up my own shoes, fixed my bike, filled out internship applications alone. Never once a question from my parents. Marco, he got private driving lessons, a family-funded prep plan for Harvard. Mom was always there to catch him, even if he tripped on the tiniest pebble. And then the moment came. I got into Stanford with a near-perfect GPA. My hands trembled holding that acceptance letter, as if I'd just touched a dream. For a second, I let myself hope, just once, that they'd finally see me. That night, I set my letter on the dinner table, but Marco came home with his Harvard acceptance. Dad lifted his glass, yelling, "Amazing, that's my boy." Mom cried, hugging Marco so hard it looked like she might break him. They completely forgot I was standing not even 3 feet away. My letter just sat there, abandoned, like a piece of trash washed up in a rainstorm. A few days later, they told me they'd drain all their savings for Marco's tuition. "You'll figure it out on your own, Hunter," they said. It wasn't encouragement anymore. It was a cold, final sentence. I nodded, silent, but inside, a tiny flame sparked, one they would never see. From that moment on, I promised myself, if I had to stand alone, I'd stand at the top. I didn't need applause. I didn't need proud glances. All I needed was one thing, me, whole, unbreakable, and never again asking anyone's permission just to exist. When my family decided to spend every last dime of their savings on Marco's tuition, I just nodded. No tears, no shouting. I drove that beat-up old car, the engine growling like an empty stomach, all the way to Oakland. There, I rented a room smaller than Marco's garage. It smelled like mold, the walls were peeling. That first night, I lay on a thin mattress on the floor, listening to rats scurrying and gunshots echoing in the distance. I turned on the old laptop a friend had given me. The pale blue light spilled across the ceiling, like a lonely moon lost at sea. I started typing line after line of code, a personal finance app for students, born straight out of my own empty pockets. I wanted to help kids like me learn how to count every last penny so they wouldn't have to choose between a textbook and dinner. By day, I waited tables at a cafe near the docks. By night, I coded until my hands went numb and my eyes burned. Many nights I fell asleep right on the keyboard, waking up to random strings of letters on the screen. But I never stopped. There was a time I had to choose between buying rice or paying for the internet. I chose the internet because to me, it wasn't just Wi-Fi. It was the only lifeline I had to claw my way out of the shadow they shoved me into. Marco was living a different universe. Every week he FaceTimed home, bragging about Harvard networking parties, debate workshops, dinners at upscale restaurants, all funded by the family. Mom and Dad beamed, asking every detail. Did you eat well? Need more money? And me? I heard nothing but bank overdraft alerts and the growl of my stomach late at night. One evening, while handing a latte to a customer, I got an email from Stanford. Congratulations, you've been awarded the full Independent Student Support Scholarship. I froze, almost dropping the tray. The whole cafe buzzed around me, but all I heard was my heart pounding, loud as those street drums back in San Jose. For the first time, someone saw my effort, unfiltered, unshadowed by anyone else. But I wasn't stopping there. The app I was building started catching the attention of other students. A small group from UC Berkeley offered to help develop it. We fixed bugs, streamlined the interface, argued over every tiny pixel. I sold everything I didn't absolutely need, scraping together enough to pay server fees and buy extra storage. Every dollar I made, I reinvested, ignoring the gnawing hunger, the torn sneakers. Some nights, I walked alone through pitch-black streets, clutching my laptop to my chest, my heart pounding from fear of getting jumped. And yet, I had never felt so free. Marco sent a picture of his new car, captioned, "Thanks Mom and Dad for the best gift ever." I stared at it, felt nothing. I had stopped expecting anything from them a long time ago. One morning, while waiting tables, I got an email from TechCrunch. "We'd like to interview you about your app GrowSafe, the new student lifesaver tool." I couldn't believe it. My fingers trembled over my phone. 2 weeks later, the article dropped, front and center in the startup section. Hunter Lopez, the self-made kid revolutionizing student life in America. The piece went viral across student forums, Facebook finance groups. That night, my phone exploded with texts, interview requests, partnership offers. A few venture capital firms from Silicon Valley reached out, offering $2 million in seed funding. I stared at the email, thinking back to that Christmas night, to my mom's voice, "Your brother is the future." And now, here I was, in that shabby Oakland room, my mind on fire, my hands gripping a future no one could steal from me. Could I surpass Marco? Would I be strong enough to stand in front of my parents and force them to see the sun they had pushed aside? The answer would come when I stepped onto that Stanford stage, where every light finally had no choice but to shine on me. Have you ever seen a kid silently lay brick after brick to build a castle of their own? The day of the Stanford speech came at me like a San Jose summer wind, fast, scorching, and impossible to predict. That morning, I put on an old white dress shirt. The cuffs were frayed, threads hanging loose, but I ironed it so crisp there wasn't a single wrinkle left. I slipped on my worn-out sneakers, thinking of every rainy night I had sprinted home, the smell of cheap coffee that kept me alive through all those long, hungry days. Before I left, I looked into a cracked mirror and told myself, today, everything changes forever. I arrived at Stanford 2 hours early. Backstage, I scrolled through messages from investors. One new notification popped up. We've officially wired $2 million into GrowSafe's account. Welcome to Silicon Valley, Hunter. I closed my eyes. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it felt like they might shatter. On stage, the MC introduced each graduating standout. Marco's parents sat front row, eyes fixed on him. They had planned a huge party that night, rented out a ballroom in downtown Palo Alto, all to celebrate Marco's achievements. Marco looked slick in his black suit, silk tie, that polished glow like he'd just stepped out of a Harvard brochure. He shook hands confidently, smiling like he already owned the future. And me? I had a TechCrunch article queued up to go live that evening, titled Hunter Lopez, the Forgotten Son Who Built a $1 Million Empire. That article would hit the internet the moment I began my speech. When the MC finally called my name, my feet felt like they were made of lead. I stepped out, the lights blasting into my face, the old wood of the podium smelling sharp and raw. Dad frowned. Mom turned away, like she was terrified I'd do something embarrassing. Marco bit his lip, eyes glued to his phone. I took a deep breath. Hi, I started, my voice raspy but steady. I'm Hunter Lopez, and I used to be the unchosen son. A ripple of whispers spread across the hall, like wind rustling through dry leaves. I used to think if I was good enough, quiet enough, obedient enough, one day they'd look at me with pride. I stared directly at my parents. But no, all I ever heard was, "Your brother needs it more." Someone in the audience gasped. I lifted my hand as if to cradle every scar from the past. I had to choose between textbooks and dinner. I slept on a cold floor, staying up all night to the sound of gunshots outside. I truly believed no one needed me. I paused, letting the silence tear through the air. But out of that darkness, I built GrowSafe, an app that's helping thousands of students stand on their own 2 feet. Last night, it secured a $2 million investment from one of Silicon Valley's top funds. The crowd erupted in shock, a wave breaking all at once. I saw Marco drop his phone, his face ghostly pale. My mom covered her mouth, eyes wide and wet. Dad leaned back, lips pressed tight, unable to speak. What I've learned, I continued, my voice slow and deliberate, is that no one is born to live in someone else's shadow. Every child deserves their own place to stand. Never let anyone tell you to wait your turn. I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket, a fresh printout of the TechCrunch article, and held it high for everyone to see. This isn't revenge. This is proof that resilience can turn silence into a legacy. The applause started small, then grew, roaring like a summer storm. Marco buried his face in his hands, his shoulders trembling. My mom dabbed her eyes, mascara running. Dad bowed his head, too stunned to find words. I set the article down on the podium and bowed. Today, no one could look away. No one could pretend I didn't exist. The spotlight blazed down, so bright it nearly blinded me. But this time, I wasn't afraid. The applause roared through the auditorium, crashing against the walls like waves on a rocky shore. I stood there on stage, steady as a monument, an unshakable declaration. Hunter Lopez existed, and more than that, he had won. My father kept his head down, fingers gripping the armrests so tight his knuckles turned bone white. My mother dabbed at tears she could no longer hide. Marco, he just sat there, face ashen, like fireworks ashes after the last spark faded. I stepped off the stage, the clapping still echoing behind me. Friends, professors, People who once looked right through me now rushed forward, hugging me, shaking my hand, patting my back. Through the crowd, I saw Dean Rodriguez, head of Stanford's business school, her eyes glimmering, holding up a card. "The Hunter Lopez Independent Scholarship launches today." I nodded and took the mic. "The Hunter Lopez Independent Scholarship," I announced, my voice sharp and unwavering, "is for every student without a safety net but who refuses to give up. This isn't just money, it's a promise. No one gets left behind." The hall exploded again. Some cried, some chanted my name. I looked toward the front row, where my mom had finally set down her tissue, her eyes puffy and raw. My dad looked up, his eyes murky, all that old certainty gone. Marco stood up, taking slow, shaky steps toward me. He stopped a few feet away, lips trembling. "Bro," Marco choked out, his voice strangled. I didn't know you went through all of that." I looked at him, and in that moment, I felt no anger, only emptiness. "It wasn't your responsibility to know," I replied, my voice strangely calm. "I chose this path on my own, and you were just another victim of their blind expectations." Marco's head dropped, tears splattering on the floor. The room fell completely silent, waiting. I turned to my parents. "Mom, Dad, I don't need your apology. I don't need your pride. All I want you to understand is this: favoritism can destroy a family, but resilience can build a legacy." My mother's hands shook as she whispered, "We were wrong." I nodded, a thin, quiet smile on my face. "I know." Behind me, the giant screen lit up with the GrowSafe logo and the words, "Trusted by over 500,000 students nationwide." Music swelled, breaking the heavy silence. Dean Rodriguez stepped forward, handing me a plaque. "Student of the Year, Hunter Lopez." I accepted it, my heart beating steady, like those footsteps I took on rainy nights. Right then, I thought of my 13-year-old self, sitting alone in a dark room, listening to piano music drifting from a neighbor's house, believing life had locked its doors forever. Who would have guessed that boy would one day stand here, cheered by thousands, holding $1 million empire and a scholarship fund bearing his name? I took a deep breath, turned to the audience, the mic close to my lips. "You might be pushed aside, dismissed, told you're not good enough, but don't let that noise drown out your voice. If anyone has ever doubted you, let your success answer for you." The applause exploded again, like a sandstorm tearing across the California desert. I raised the plaque high, feeling the wind slip between my fingers, touching every old wound, every lonely night, every single failure. I had come full circle, from the forgotten son to the author of my family's story, to a symbol for every kid who was ever called invisible. I stepped off that stage, behind me the music, the applause, and for the first time, the ashamed eyes of my family. Marco ran after me. My mom rose and called my name, but I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I walked straight toward the sunlight outside, where my real journey was just beginning. Have you ever stood up in a crowd that turned its back on you and turned your pain into wings? If you haven't, remember this: don't wait to be chosen. Write your own name across the sky.